When I was sentenced to 55 months in federal prison, it seemed like most of the conversations I needed to have were with myself. How could I have gotten so lost? How could I have agreed to participate in a spiritual process that was supposed to be all about truth and yet involved so much deception, not only of myself, but ultimately of many others? How could I agree to something so corrupt? What in me had been so quick to lose my integrity, to chase an ungrounded, devious way of exploring the deeper truths of life? How could I have fallen into the trap after seeing myself as such an independent person all my life? How could I fall into the obvious trap of giving so much power to someone else? Nobody else could answer these questions for me. I knew I had to face them within myself, and I knew that it wasn't going to be quick. So even before I went to prison, and then while I was in prison, and then since I've gotten out of prison, I've continued to reflect on these questions within myself, a kind of self-examination, a look at things I had been trying to overlook for most of my life. And the more I looked, and the more I felt into things, the more I began to come to terms with what I had done and what I had led other people into. The more this naturally led me to begin to want to share these conversations more and more with other people. It's one thing to discover something within yourself. It's another thing to share it with others. And I began to find that a lot of people are understandably wary or avoidant of having these kind of deep conversations. Why would you want to look at the ugly parts of life? Why would you want to look at the ugly parts of yourself? Who would want to go there? What's the point? Why not just focus on the positive? Why not enjoy our lives? Why not live? But I had come to understand through my own losing of my own way that without an exploration of these hidden parts of myself, and by extension, it seemed to me, of ourselves, that life was going to catch up with us sooner or later. The parts of us that we don't like or we're trying to keep buried beneath the surface were going to emerge. So as I began to emerge and to come back into life and to relate more openly with other people, I began to discover and I began to say that I seem to get most interested in conversations right at the point where other people seem to want to end them, where they want to run away, where they want to say, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to explore that about myself. But once you've looked into these depths, once you have begun to make peace with the demons and the dark places within yourself, it becomes increasingly unsatisfying to relate on the superficial levels. You can feel what's being avoided. You can feel what is hidden. You can feel what is unloved. You can feel what's being pushed aside in order to present a more positive version of ourselves. And I'm very fortunate to have some people in my life who have been willing to go these places with me, to explore in relationship, in friendship, in love, in partnership, in family, to explore what it means to be deeply truthful, even about the ugliest and most difficult parts of life. I'm profoundly grateful for those connections and for those relationships that have allowed me to almost literally come out of myself and to begin to share more openly with others. And for the past couple of years, more and more, I've had this kind of bigger desire to share this, to open this stuff up, to have conversations in places where conversations are often avoided. And this eventually led me 3 months ago to start this YouTube channel. And I didn't want this, and this never has been and never will be, as far as I know, a performance. I didn't want this to be a performance. I didn't want this to be some neatly polished, shined up version of myself. I wanted this to be a conversation that can ask the deeper, harder, more painful, and in my experience, ultimately more rewarding questions. What happens if we get lost? What happens if we fail? What happens if we royally screw up? Is our life over? Is there a way back? And if there is a way back, or if there are ways back, what might they be? What do I do when both I'm telling myself and the world is telling me that I'm a failure, that I've screwed up, that I deserve to be punished, that I'm wrong, that I'm a fool, whatever? So I wanted to begin conversations that, or open the door to conversations that might normally be closed because we're too afraid to look, or we haven't known how to look, or we haven't known how to integrate or welcome or ultimately even embrace the darker, more messed up, rough-edged parts of ourselves. I never know where that conversation is going to go. First, I wanted to offer this conversation to people who were hurt by what I did, people who lost money, people who lost trust. I don't know if any of those people have found this channel. I know that a few of my close friends who were investors in the film project are watching and appreciating what's happening here. But I don't know if any of the other people who were hurt by what I did have found this channel. I haven't heard from them yet. And I've wanted this to be just an offering. When you violate people's trust, not everyone wants you to show up knocking on their door and saying, hey, let's talk. Some of those people never want to see me again, and I understand and I respect that. But I wanted in this YouTube channel to open to and offer access to conversations that may be taboo, that may be difficult, that may be almost universally avoided in our culture. And I've been so grateful for how people have responded. I've heard from people who have been in prison and are glad to hear someone talk about their experience in prison, and glad to hear someone talk about rebuilding a life after totally screwing up a life. So this YouTube channel is about opening and starting conversations for anyone who chooses to engage. I've never made a video here that I think is perfect. I don't write things down. I usually just start with an idea and put some thought into it and then just see wherever it goes. I always forget things. Sometimes I get lost. Sometimes I get too wordy. But my intention is to offer and provide an opening to conversations that may be generally avoided. At some point, I want to begin having conversations about race, because I learned and experienced a lot of what happens in our racial divisiveness while I was in prison. As you know, if you've been watching, I've been talking about what do we do as a culture when we see how many things aren't working. How do we talk about that? How do we engage in ways that might be useful and productive? And in every conversation I begin here, it's like real conversation. Sometimes I do well. Sometimes I express myself in ways that feel genuine and clear, and sometimes I fumble around the edges. But the invitation is to share from my experience the profound benefit of opening ourselves to look, to explore, to talk about, and to share deeply about the things that have been most hidden, most buried, most taboo. Thank you so much for those of you who have joined me so far in this. This is still a small channel. I've been doing it for 3 months. I think this morning, as I'm recording this video, there are 117 subscribers. That's 117 people that I didn't know before I began this. That's the beginning of 117 and more. I know there are a lot of people who haven't subscribed. That's the beginning of conversations that I hope to continue, and that I will do my best to continue with openness, with honesty, even in the hardest places, even in the places where it can be difficult and sometimes nearly impossible to open, to share, and to talk honestly. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for listening. Because this is a conversation, it's especially meaningful to me to hear from you, to hear of your experiences, in prison, in life, in facing the hardest things and coming through to a deeper understanding of yourselves. Please do share. Please do like, if you do like these videos. Please do subscribe. Please comment. And please let me know about what's useful about this and what you might like to see more. Thank you so much for coming to visit. Hope to see you again soon.